What if I told you the voice behind some of the warmest hits in FM radio history was voted out of his own band, then watched strangers perform his songs under his name for decades? The founding members of Little River Band would eventually sign away control of their legacy in a corporate structure of their own making. A replacement would later say he saw little financial reward for the years he gave. This is the Glenn Shorrock problem Little River Band couldn't survive. February 1982. A band meeting in Melbourne ended with a founding member walking out the door. Not of his own choosing, and after years of growing tension inside the group, but because the situation had finally reached a breaking point. Glenn Shorrock, the warm baritone voice behind some of the most beloved soft rock in American history, was out of Little River Band. What made the moment even more stunning was how little warning had come. Shorrock had not seen it coming. He later recalled thinking simply, "What? I didn't expect to be replaced, let's put it that way." The touring had been relentless for years. The creative tensions had been real and deepening, but dismissal had never been the word in the air, until suddenly it was the only word that mattered. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And yet, even in that moment of personal shock, Shorrock displayed the quiet grace that had always defined him. As he walked out of that final, fateful meeting, he turned back to his former partners and offered 4 words that would shape the next chapter of everything. "I think you should get Farnham." That night, manager Glenn Wheatley placed a late-night phone call to John Farnham, who was on holiday in Victoria. Farnham and his wife Jill spent hours weighing the offer into the early morning. Farnham feared the pressure of stepping into a legendary frontman's shoes on a global stage. The band's American success was still very much alive in the public imagination. Those hits were everywhere. But the promise of international exposure, financial security, and rock credibility on a new continent eventually proved too compelling to turn down. By dawn, he had said yes. Little River Band believed they had solved a problem. What they had actually done was begin one. To understand why that decision carried such extraordinary weight, you had to understand what Little River Band had actually built, and how much of it rested on the foundation of one man's voice. The band formed in Melbourne in March 1975, and from the beginning, it was assembled on an unusual foundation. These were not young unknowns chasing a first break. They were seasoned Australian musicians with real professional histories behind them. Glenn Shorrock had already achieved national stardom in the 1960s with a harmony-rich beat group, the Twilights, before helping pioneer a country rock sound with the supergroup Axiom. After a period in London doing session work, he returned to Melbourne in late 1974 and linked up with guitarist and primary songwriter Graham Goebel and fellow guitarist B. Birtles. When those 3 voices found each other, something crystallized that hadn't quite existed before in Australian music. Their sound was sophisticated in a way that Australian rock hadn't produced. Jazz-tinted chord progressions, immaculate 3-part vocal harmonies, lyrics that felt personal without being self-indulgent. And underneath all of it, anchoring everything, was Shorrock's baritone. Warm, reassuring, instantly recognizable. The kind of voice that made a listener feel like an old friend was speaking directly to them across the radio. The key that unlocked America was a legendary producer who had helped shape the California country rock sound. John Boylan made a long flight to Australia, under skepticism from others who couldn't see the value. He arrived at a rehearsal, heard Shorrock, Goebel, and Birtles harmonizing with just 2 acoustic guitars, and knew immediately. This was a world-class sound. He signed on. The hits followed with remarkable, almost unsettling consistency. Help Is On Its Way helped build their international profile in 1977. Then came Reminiscing, written by Goebel after lead guitarist David Briggs showed him a complex jazz chord shape in a television studio green room. Goebel went home and experienced what he later described as a powerful burst of inspiration, writing the melody and its sophisticated lyrics in just 30 minutes. Despite early doubts from the label, Reminiscing climbed all the way to number 3 on the American charts. I wanna build my world around you. Lady, Cool Change, Lonesome Loser, The Night Owls, Take It Easy on Me. Hit followed hit with the kind of effortless consistency that made it easy to forget how hard-won each one actually was. Between the late 1970s and the early 1980s, they became one of the most played bands on FM radio across the country. But here was the truth, hiding inside all that success. Many bands had great songs. Very few had a voice that listeners trusted the way they trusted Shorrock. He wasn't just delivering the melodies, he was the emotional center of them. The human face that a generation of American listeners attached to everything Little River Band stood for. The songs and the voice had fused together in the minds of millions. They were no longer separate things. They never had been. The problem with sustained success was that it created illusions. And the most dangerous illusion Little River Band fell into was deceptively simple, because the songs were so brilliantly constructed, because the arrangements were so polished, because the harmonies were so technically immaculate. Maybe the lead singer wasn't actually the irreplaceable part. Maybe what made the machine work was the machine itself. This illusion didn't appear overnight. It grew slowly, nurtured by internal fractures that most fans never saw or suspected. The band that sounded so warm and unified on record was anything but unified on the road. During their peak touring years in the late 1970s, Little River Band often traveled in separate circles, reflecting the divisions inside the group. One side was more disciplined and focused. The other was looser and more social. Two worlds. One band name printed on the marquee. That division transferred directly into the recording studio. During the tracking of albums like Diamantina Cocktail in 1977 and Time Exposure in 1981, the interpersonal tension had grown so severe that the band often worked in ways that kept conflict to a minimum, with members sometimes recording parts separately rather than as a fully unified unit. And in this fractured, disconnected environment, a particularly dangerous idea found fertile ground. Goebel, a deeply disciplined, intensely private songwriter who had dedicated his entire life to crafting hits since the age of 13, had poured everything into the structural architecture of those recordings. The chord progressions, the arrangements, the layered harmonies. He and Bertels had written a significant portion of the catalog, and so, gradually, almost imperceptibly, the songwriters began to view Shorrock's vocal contribution as a mechanical function, as something modular, as something that could be exchanged without fundamentally disrupting what made the band commercially successful. The songs are what made us, is what they thought. The voice just delivers them, and if the voice just delivered the songs, then a better voice, a fresher voice, might actually deliver them more effectively than the original ever had. It was a seductive idea. It felt rational. It was supported by every commercial metric they could point to. And it was catastrophically wrong, because the audience was not separating the songs from the voice the way the songwriters were. For millions of Americans who had grown up with Little River Band pouring out of their car radios on summer evenings, those songs and that voice had merged into a single emotional memory. You couldn't extract Shorrock from reminiscing and still have reminiscing. What remained was a collection of brilliant notes arranged around an absence. The band didn't fully understand that yet. The audience would teach them, slowly, painfully, and at great cost. Little River Band didn't replace Glenn Shorrock with a lesser singer. They replaced him with one of the most gifted vocalists Australia had ever produced. And that fact was what made the story so complicated and so instructive. John Farnham was extraordinary by any measure. A powerful acrobatic tenor with the kind of emotional range that could shift a crowd in a single phrase. He had stage presence, technical command, and a natural charisma that would eventually make him the best-selling recording artist in Australian history. If the band's theory was correct, if the songs were the product and the voice was simply the delivery vehicle, then Farnham represented the best possible upgrade they could have made. But almost immediately, the mismatch between his gifts and the band's identity began to reveal itself. In a candid interview, Farnham acknowledged the difficulty directly. "We've had to change the key with a lot of things, because Glenn sang in a different register from me. The songs that American audiences had memorized, down to their last melodic contour, their every familiar note, now arrived in different keys, shaped by a fundamentally different vocal personality. Radio programmers who had spent years playing Little River Band heard something they couldn't quite place. The audience sensed the same thing. Something was different, and not in the way they had hoped. Beyond the sonic mismatch, the creative environment inside the band was deteriorating rapidly. During the recording of their mid-1980s material, Farnham contributed to the title track and other sessions as the band tried to find a new direction. By the time the songs went through the collective production process, the situation had become increasingly territorial. Every member wanted a share of the songwriting credit, and the process became tangled in disputes over contribution and ownership. Farnham later described the entire era in his memoir as defined by constant undercurrents of animosity, jealousy, and petty peeves. And the financial reality was equally devastating. Despite years of relentless international touring with the band, Farnham later said he saw little financial return from the period. The label had extended massive financial advances in previous years, and royalties were largely absorbed by the band's recoupment structure. Farnham only fully moved on when he left in 1986 and returned to solo work that would soon make him a national phenomenon in his own right. He had given years of his career to Little River Band and walked away with little to show for it. Meanwhile, Goebel had used the Farnham era to push the band's sound in a dramatically different direction, harder, more electronic, chasing the MTV aesthetic that was reshaping the mid-1980s music industry. It alienated the traditional American fan base that had made the band's fortune, confused the radio programmers who had loved the warm, acoustic precision of the earlier records, and produced none of the commercial breakthroughs Goebel had envisioned. The gamble had failed on every level, and the cost was not merely commercial. Something deeper had been revealed. The band had told its audience that it was willing to trade the voice they loved for something else. Once that message landed, it couldn't be unsent. By 1987, with the experiment having failed and the band facing the very real prospect of losing their label deal entirely, a lifeline arrived. But it arrived attached to a condition that made Goebel's position untenable. A powerful music executive with enormous industry leverage agreed to sign the band to a new deal. His terms were blunt and non-negotiable. Bring Glenn Shorrock back. The man who had been shown the door 5 years earlier was now the price of admission to any viable future. Goebel, who had been the driving force behind Shorrock's dismissal in 1982, had no choice but to swallow his pride and make the call. Shorrock returned, and briefly, the reunion produced something real. The 1988 single, Love is a Bridge, broke into the American Top 40, a genuine flash of the warmth and precision that had once defined the band's golden era. Fans who heard it on the radio recognized the sound immediately, that voice, that familiar, reassuring warmth. For a moment, it seemed like what had been lost might actually be recoverable. But the magic that had once emerged naturally now required conscious effort. The years of legal friction, public dismissals, and accumulated bitterness had taken a toll that couldn't be reversed by goodwill alone. The chemistry that had once felt effortless now felt like something being carefully maintained. Then the band made what Goebel himself would later describe as their most catastrophic mistake, and it had nothing to do with music at all. Over the following years, the active members formed a holding company and transferred the band's assets into it, including the name itself and the logo, dividing shares among the members at the time. It seemed on the surface like reasonable business planning. It was not. As the founding members grew exhausted over the following years and gradually stepped away, each one selling their shares in the company as they departed, they had no idea they were systematically delivering sole ownership of everything they had built to one man, lead guitarist Stephen Houston. By 1998, Houston was the last man standing in the corporate structure. He owned Little River Band, legally, completely, entirely. Goebel later admitted the fatal error with quiet devastation. The LRB name was never for sale. It was lost to Stephen Houston because of a legal document that transferred the name. The name should have been licensed, not transferred. The founding members of one of Australia's most successful musical exports had signed away their own legacy, not to a hostile predator, but to a document they had drafted themselves. In 2002, Bertels, Shorrock, and Goebel, the founding creative core of Little River Band, attempted to reunite and tour together under the name they had spent decades building. A federal court ruling stopped them. The name belonged to Houston, legally, unambiguously, and entirely. The men who had written Reminiscing from a 30-minute flash of inspiration. The man whose voice had made millions of Americans feel something genuine and lasting. They were barred from calling themselves what they had always been. The solicitor who represented them during the legal battle reflected on the ruling with careful honesty. Legally, it's a fair outcome because the documentation was all there, but from the point of view of their heritage, it galls them slightly. And the story went further than a courtroom ruling. Over time, an all-American lineup with no original members, no Australians, no one who had written or recorded those songs, began touring the United States under the Little River Band name, performing the catalog to audiences who often had no idea they were not seeing the people who had actually created it. Goebel eventually addressed it in an interview with barely contained fury. We were a faceless band in many ways, so that's given rise to this all-American band walking out on stage and touring the States under the name Little River Band, with no original members playing our repertoire. For the most part, people buying tickets are not realizing they're not seeing the original people who wrote and recorded all the songs. He added one final, painful detail. The main thing that pisses us off is that when you go onto Spotify and you click on one of our iconic hits, their photo comes up. The original members responded the only way they truly could, through music. Goebel released a track called Someone's Taken Our History in 2005. Bertles answered with Revolving Door in 2012. And Glenn Shorrock, the voice that had started everything and endured everything, addressed the situation directly on his 2016 album Rise Again, with a song called Hear My Voice. The lyrics carried the weight of everything the story had cost him. I don't care who is right or wrong. You've got my name. I've still got my song. I don't care what you might call me. Hear my voice and you will know me. That final line contained the truth the band had spent 2 decades learning at enormous cost. Trademarks can be transferred. Corporate documents can be signed and notarized. Names can be reassigned to whoever holds the correct paperwork. But the identity of Little River Band, the thing that had made generations of Americans stop what they were doing and reach for the volume knob, was never in any document. It was in a voice. And the moment the band decided that voice was replaceable, they set in motion a chain of events that ended with strangers performing their songs under their name while they watched from the outside. The Glenn Shorrock problem was never really about Glenn Shorrock. It was about what the band chose not to understand, that the voice wasn't delivering the songs. The voice was the songs. And by the time that truth had finally made itself impossible to ignore, there was nothing left to reclaim. Little River Band proved you can build something beautiful out of talent, discipline, and craft. But you cannot separate that beauty from the human voice at its center without losing what made people care. Their hits still roll across classic rock radio, warm as a summer night. But behind those songs lives a quiet warning about identity, about hubris, and the irreplaceable thing you never understand until it's gone. What's your favorite Little River Band memory? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from rock's greatest era.